Hello, and welcome to episode 3 of John Flavel's Fountain of Life. And this episode, we're going to dive into the first sermon. So the first chapter, really, of this book, The Fountain of Life Opened Up. Okay, so this is sermon 1, and it's only about one verse. That's about 1 Corinthians 2:2. For I determined not to know anything among you save Jesus Christ and Him crucified. And we're going to get John Flavel's thoughts on this particular verse, as well as why it opens up and how it starts. Christ is the fountain of life. Christ is everything excellent. Christ is everything that's needed for the believer. Okay. All right. So let me read that verse again, and we'll dive in. For I determined not to know anything among you save Jesus Christ and Him crucified. So his first points are about how if you take everything that the world has made, all the knowledge of the world, all the wisdom of the world, and you compare that to the scale of what Jesus Christ is and who Jesus Christ is, Jesus is going to outweigh that whole scale. No library can contain the knowledge of Christ, any aspect of Jesus, any one character trait of Christ. A person could spend their whole life trying to learn and would never fully comprehend and would never fully reach the end of it. And so he's saying, not only is it excellent, it's inexhaustible. It's the most excellent type of knowledge that you can find. It's also the most inexhaustible knowledge you can find. You study anything else, you're going to come to the end. You're going to master it, relatively. You can master just about anything, but you'll never be able to master the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Okay? And he particularly mentions this phrase, as does the apostle, and Him crucified. I want to know nothing among you except for Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Okay? And so he's like, why do we just want to know A, this person, and B, this aspect of this person? Is because without the cross of Christ, we don't have a resurrection. In Romans, Paul says that without a resurrection, we're to be the most foolish. Christians are the most foolish of people, because after the resurrection, we get the power of Christ, right? The Holy Spirit comes, all those other fulfillments come because of the resurrection of Christ. But here's why John Flavel believes that Paul writes Christ and Him crucified. It's because Christ's crucifixion was to the Jews a stumbling block and to the Greeks foolishness. Okay, and so if other people knew this aspect about Jesus Christ, then they are true believers. Okay, so that's the true test of a believer, is what do they know about Christ and what do they know about His crucifixion? And that's why John Flavel believes that Paul believes that that's the most important aspect of a believer to know about another person, if they are saved, and what they know about the excellency of Christ. Okay, so it says here, he has like a thing about the doctrine here. It says, no doctrine is more excellent or is more necessary to be preached and studied than the doctrines of Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Okay, that's the mantra for this message. That's like the overarching, he's like, if you get anything from that, understand that there's nothing that deserves more attention than Jesus Christ and His crucifixion. He says that the knowledge of Jesus Christ is the very marrow and kernel of all the scriptures. The scope, the center of all divine revelations in both testaments all meet in Jesus Christ. So it's like no matter what book of the Bible you're studying, it's going to point you to Christ. It's going to point you to the most excellent one, the most pure one. Okay, it's the most fundamental of all knowledge, and it's all about grace. It's all about comfort and happiness. All those three things can be found in Jesus Christ and getting to know Jesus Christ. Grace, duty, comfort, and happiness. All the things that you need to live can be found in Jesus Christ. I said these are the most foundational. And he says that oftentimes you don't really look at a foundation, unless you're buying a house, right? You don't really inspect a foundation if you're over at somebody's place. And he says, even though it's the most fundamental and the most foundational, we need to make sure that it's there. That way you have you understand all the four things. You understand grace, your duty as a believer, the comfort that you have, and the happiness that you can have in Jesus Christ. Okay. Another part that really stuck out to me, he talks about the bottomless ocean that no creature can line, that no creature can be in long enough to fathom the depth and the height, the length, depth, and breadth ascribe to the excellency of Jesus Christ, ascribe to the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Okay, here's a mystery and excellency of the knowledge of Christ, that men of the most blunt, dull, and contemptible sort of nature, so people that don't understand much can understand Jesus Christ. They can still, it says that even the most utterly blind can still can still see the light of Christ, can still experience the light and love of Christ. And it says in Matthew 11:25, I thank thee, O Father, Lord of heaven and earth, because you have hid these things from the wise and prudent and have revealed them unto babes. And so he says, it doesn't matter what station of life you're in, doesn't matter your faculty, doesn't matter your upbringing, you can still experience the excellency of Christ. Okay, and here we have inferences 5 and 6. So this sermon is given as 5 inferences, okay, and things that you can apply as a believer. And the first one, and you for 1, 2, 3, and 4 are all kind of put together, and then you get to 5 and 6. And 5 and 6 to me are the most impactful. The first 4 just kind of go off of that same topic about the excellency of Christ. There's nothing greater than Christ. It's unfathomable, that it is better than anything the world has to offer. It's to inform and judge, and every pastor is supposed to make sure that this is foundational first before he goes on to anything else. That's number 4. And then number 1, it's to make us wise unto salvation. Okay, to make us saved. And then for us, that is the most excellent thing, and that it is the best thing to be studied, and it's to inform and judge. Okay, now number 5, and this is the one that's really impactful to me. 5 and 6 are just incredibly powerful portions of the sermon. He says here that in Christ, souls have all the necessary food needed for your physic, food needed for your body, all the varieties of fruits, all the sweetness of them, all their attributes, all the promises, all the ordinances in him are all these fruits at all times. So all the promises of Christ, all the doctrines of Christ, and all the attributes of Christ are there continually at all times and accessible to the believer. Okay, and here it says, study to know Christ more intensively to get the experimental taste and lively power of his knowledge upon your hearts and affections. Okay, so it's a power of not only of your knowledge, but of your mind and your heart and affection. Okay, so it's like when your heart's in the right place, then everything else will follow through. And now we're going to get to number 6. And this one's my personal, I'm not sure if it's not my personal favorite, but you'll see that I don't think there's there's more underlining in there than there's not. Okay. And so this says that the believer needs to exercise what they know. That's the main summary of number 6. But it says, shall we study this and not do anything about it? He cites some monks that were turned with loathing from schools of divinity because it talked more about the theory than it did the practice. And it says we need to develop from what we know about the knowledge of Jesus Christ. He said, let us see that our knowledge of Christ be not a powerless, barren, unpractical knowledge. Okay, so it needs to be applied, lived out, and it's supposed to give us power. It's supposed to give us life. And that comes from living a holy life. And it says, here, listen to this. It says, remember, brethren, a holy calling never saved any man without a holy heart. If our tongues only be sanctified, our whole man would be damned. Okay, so if it's just one aspect, if you're just saying the things that you know, that doesn't matter at all. It's about doing the things of Christ. It's about living out the Christ-like life. It's about living out the excellencies of Christ, all of his attributes, comforts, happiness, and duties that you can be found in Jesus Christ. It's about living those out. And it says, let us take heed that we withhold not our knowledge as well, so that we are informing others about the knowledge of Jesus Christ, about his excellencies, about all the things that you can obtain through a life that's following Christ. Not that it's all about us, but it is a way for us to reach and minister to others. It says, make sure that your time, your gifts are not yours but God's, and remember that the pinching wants of souls who are perishing for want of Christ, and their tongues do not, yet their necessities do tell us. Okay, so it says, even if people aren't saying that they need Christ, their lives say it. Their lives might be falling apart. Their families might be crumbling. He's like, if you use these principles, if you live according to Christ, you'll be able to save families, homes, financial situations. And so he's like, just because people aren't asking you for Christ doesn't mean that their lives aren't asking you for Christ. Okay, and he says the closing lines here are more for like seasoned believers. And it says, don't despise and reject this light. And he says, despising this light, the light of Christ, is kind of like when you roll your eyes at first. It says it's the richest gift ever that was ever given to this church, that Christ ever gave to the church, was himself. It said, with your tones and your gestures, you can portray that it's not your true love, that he's not your true love. So it's like despising can just look like neglect. And that's how things can be despised, right? You can just kind of like walk the other way, and you can like dare to do some sins that you wouldn't normally do. And so you can despise Christ even by like, simple things is what he's saying. So just make sure that your heart's right. Make sure that you have that holy heart before the Lord. Okay, and he says, don't despise the directions and loving constraints of that knowledge. Okay, so he's like, if you know about all this stuff and you don't do it, you're despising this knowledge. So if you learn something about Christ, like Christ said, don't do this, and you continue to do it, you're not living out that knowledge and you're despising the knowledge. And here it says, the last thing that he says is to grow. Take heed that you rest and are not satisfied with the knowledge of Christ that you do have. He said, but grow towards perfection. It is the pride and ignorance of many professors when they have got a few raw and indigested notions to swell with self-conceit of their excellent attainments. He also says that you as an individual will be able to find things about Christ that many people might not be able to find. He said that the most eagle-eyed person, the person, like, I love that idea, the most eagle-eyed person who's like just studying the scriptures, all the time, you might be able to have a different revelation of Christ because of his unique relationship with you. I said, just because you have that unique revelation doesn't mean that you shouldn't keep following the Lord. You shouldn't keep growing in the scriptures. It says, don't make that one, if you have that like special revelation about Jesus Christ, or that one thing that kind of sticks out to you more than other people, that's awesome, but make sure that you keep growing. Make sure you're not just stay there and satisfied there. And the last thing that he says is how he ends his sermon. Count everything in comparison with Christ as dross. Okay, so as nothing. It is that excellency which is in the knowledge of Jesus Christ. Okay, so everything that is not a part of the excellency of Jesus Christ, like he started. If you weigh all of the knowledge of this world compared with the knowledge of Christ, compared with the excellency of Christ, Christ is going to win every time. History, philosophy, arts, media, entertainment, you take all of those things and you stack them against one person, our Godhead deity, the Son of God, and it's all going to fall short. Okay? So make sure that you know Jesus Christ and him crucified.